Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.03, roll call.
Jason Decker,
Here.
Mary Lee Hall,
Here.
Samantha Hall. Here. William Hall,
Here.
Jeremy Hash, Jennifer Henkel. Here. Nathan Henkel.
Here.
Lisa Stoller.
Here.
Joseph Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 2.01, public comment. I see we have one signed up. Steph Musser.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm just going to say up front, I am going to leave directly after this. It's not a commentary. I'm hungry anyway. I have just a few questions related to the budget that I wanted to pose. Watching last year's budget meeting and watching some recent follow-up budget meetings that the board has had. I wanted to ask specifically if any recent policy changes that were more the subjective policy changes, the new athletics policy, for example, have increased any of our budgeted spend. I'll just say this anecdotally from my years at Susquehannock. There were some sports teams that were co-ed, and it wasn't a political thing. It was just, it was a cost-saving measure to try to keep, costs down because we were a small district with a limited budget. I wanted to understand if this came up at Principals Advisory, if our tax dollars fund recruitment videos for athletes that are seeking college scholarships. There was a parent that was saying that they felt that the athletic department should be supplying that, and I just wanted to be clear that that's not something that's happening. Lord knows my father, when my brother wanted a wrestling scholarship, had to figure out how to use a video camera. I think we can all do that with our phones these days. Other questions, I wanted to understand, I don't know this about tax law, but are taxes assessed differently for new builds in our community versus existing properties? I know there's a lot of concern. I can say personally, up until a few years ago, my parents were elderly and living in this district on a fixed income. Just wanted to understand if there's some tax relief for the folks that have, lived here for many years or on a fixed income. I wanted to also understand what sort of supports are available for people that are in that fixed income and they qualify for the tax relief for school taxes. If there's outreach efforts in the community, because many of those people are homebound, if there's ways that we could alleviate that for elderly in the community. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just something I'm seeing it's a way that what I do in fundraising dovetails with public education funding. We're obviously seeing fluctuations in the fundraising world. The Lilly School of Philanthropy puts out what's called the Giving USA report annually. And what's been happening over the past several decades is because the baby boomer generation is aging, just the population is smaller, so fewer individuals are giving, but the wealth is concentrated amongst fewer individuals. So people are giving more, but it's fewer individuals giving. We're also seeing an interesting rise over the past 20 years or so in things like corporate foundations, charitable trusts, different sorts of funding models to bring money into nonprofit organizations. So my question related to school board funding is, and I don't understand this, about the school board funding, but is there actually an opportunity to approach our public education model like higher education is approached? Is there someone on staff maybe that is the person that's responsible for sourcing funds from charitable trusts, corporate foundation gifts that help to alleviate the budget pressure that we have? Finally, after the spirited discussion of the Education Committee and the various presentations, I took away a couple of things from that. I know that there's an interest in getting away from tech that's unnecessary or making sure that there's a better balance in tech. And I can appreciate that.
But my concern from a fiscal standpoint point is, I heard in previous budget discussions, we wanted to cut the teaching budget. How does that, taking away tech, and the need for more teachers, how is that going to balance out in the budget? And just, concerned that, if we're trying to be fiscally responsible, is that the best way to be fiscally responsible? That was my questions. I really appreciate the time to speak, and like I said, I'm going to cut out of here and go get some dinner.
Thank you.
Item 2.02, board discussion of public comment. Actually really appreciated the questions that were asked, and definitely struck a chord with me with talk of people that are on fixed incomes that really are stretched to pay their school taxes. And I'll say this, folks that have lived in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for their entire life probably don't completely understand that there's a lot of different state models for how schools are funded. My grandfather is going to be 96 years old this year. He lives in his home in Indiana, and in Indiana, schools are funded by a combination of the sales tax and the income tax. So the burden of public education is kind of naturally shifted towards those who are in their high earning years and who are in their high consumptive years, which is naturally going to be people who are in of that age where they have kids in school. And so the problem, and I have done a lot of poking around, Ms. Green knows this, I've done a lot of poking around to see, are there different ways where we could be a little bit more missile-guided in our revenue approach? And the answer is, the way that Harrisburg has set this up is it's really, we've got one weapon and it's a nuclear bomb, and it's to raise taxes on everyone is pretty much the answer. And that is really the struggle. We have to balance the fact that we have a fund balance that we're drawing down. We have inflation. We have schools that need to be funded, but we have an aging population where the average resident in this community now is a senior citizen. So that's the difficult task ahead of the board, is we have a responsibility to our schools, but also to our entire community, and we have to balance the interests of everybody. So I can't answer all of the questions that the commenter made, but really appreciated those, and certainly struck a chord with me.
There's one additional factor I'd throw in there, which is related to the aging populace, which is declining enrollment numbers, and that's a thing that we have to manage responsibly as a board, and try to take into account and do the best thing we can, given that we don't have any ability to change that, really. I mean, because people love our schools. It's just the houses are so expensive that it's hard for young families to move in. I thought a couple of questions probably Ms. Green could ask or answer, or maybe Dr. Bryson. She asked about the athletics policy. Did this result in any increased expenditures? I'm not aware of any.
No, I think the only thing, when she was saying we used to have co-ed teams, we still have we have girls track and boys track that practices together, swimming, all this. I think the one that I heard was wrestling, but I think that's more that more female wrestlers came out, that we had enough for a team.
That's what I was going to say.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, we
That's been
didn't
kind of in the
pivot
works
to
for years.
from co-ed
Right.
because of policy. It was just now
Well,
we
and
have
on
more
top of
females.
that, PIAA has their rules around Title IX for, equity, within men and women's sport, boys and girls sport. So that's lawful consideration as well, too, not just on the district. And also, regarding the videos for athletics, which she was talking about.
Recruitment videos.
Recruitment
We have
videos.
Huddle. We have Huddle. So is that not something that we could get videos from, at least in my experience, coaches would show that and use that for their athletes to help them improve. So, and that was also provided to the athletes when they were wanting to give to a college or what have you. So I feel, Dr. Bryson, correct me if I'm wrong, that's something that a coach could assist with and the athletic director?
Well, the question was, do our tax dollars fund
Right.
the creation of recruitment videos.
She was,
She said there was
maybe
a
I'm
parent who.
confused about what she was
Yeah,
asking.
she said there was someone who came in and seemed to be suggesting that they would like for the school to assist with creation of recruitment videos. But she was saying, I think that, well, but she doesn't want her tax dollars going for it. So,
We can check into it further. At one point, there was discussion of some parents wanting additional resources besides
Oh.
Huddle.
I see.
And so I think that may be what this stems from, but that's what we do have,
understand.
and that is our resource.
and what is, so Huddle, can you talk a little bit about?
That's about as far as I
Okay.
know off the
Do-
top,
do-
but I can get more
Is
information.
Huddle a thing we pay for?
Yes.
Okay, it is a
Or-
thing we pay for, but I assume it provides us with a lot of athletics-related
Services above
services.
and
Is
beyond.
that?
Absolutely, it does.
It's basically video, you have the ability to video, cut video, analyze video from an athletic perspective.
Okay, so that could be training stuff too. That's
Oh,
especially
that's
play-by-play.
that's the
Okay,
purpose,
so the
but
burden of taxpayers is not to make videos for recruitment purposes.
But part of training is recording the games, going over with the, I mean, it's marching band, but our band director would record us and then we'd watch it and be like,
Yep.
you look, you're out of step here.
Sure, you can
So
slice
that-
out your own.
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
need from it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's something we need anyway, but then if a student wants, hey, can I have that video for my highlight reel? So I guess it's a little bit of a gray area there. We're using it for training, but it has a usefulness for recruiting
So
potential.
I have direct involvement in that.
Okay.
So, our son at one point in time thought he wanted to try and play in college, and we enlisted in what's called NCSA, which is an organization that helps students, look for possible recruitment into college. And did we use clips from Huddle Video? Absolutely, yes, we did. But it's not like that was an additional cost to the school. It's just a matter of picking up a clip from a game and then, putting it into a process that we as parents are paying for.
Right.
So, but I mean, Huddle is a great thing for coaches, and for helping, students have a better understanding of the game and how it moves on the field and all of those things. So, I mean, and Huddle also gives us the ability to broadcast that game out and let other kids watch it, or watch themselves, or, I mean, Huddle is a great tool, and it cannot be exceptionally expensive, because I know parents who have it for themselves. Like they record their own kid with it.
So the other question, are taxes different for new builds versus old, outside of assessments being what taxes are based on? Do we have an answer for that?
So, in theory, no, because they should be assessed at the same level. But in reality, it's like any other system, that is there potential as a new build that it could be assessed a little higher than a house that's from 1950, even though the market value might be the same of those two houses? I think there's potential there. It's out of our realm because it's York County assessment.
Okay.
But it's as good as the objectiveness of the person assessing. So it shouldn't be, but I can see how people could potentially feel that could happen.
And then supports for fixed income residents, and then do we have a person on staff that does, I guess, the equivalent of what she was saying would be grants? I know that Mr. Carrington and Ms.
Yeah, with-
Green do that, but.
With charitable trusts and foundations, I would think there would be a potential issue of then they have influence.
So let me go back to the first one first, the senior rebate program. So the state has a senior rebate program we have, which they can apply for. In addition to that, if they're on a lower income, in addition, we have our in-house program. We do have taxpayers come here. The Office of Aging does it also. If someone would need a phone call or whatever, we make arrangements. So we make arrangements with our taxpayers whenever they would need to come, and if they need assistance in filling that paperwork out. So if people are watching this, that's something that is still open till May 15th. So they can apply for last year's taxes and get a rebate from those if they qualify.
That's good to know, I didn't know that.
So we do put it in our newsletter, it's on our website, we try to advertise it wherever. So,
Yep, we have forms with senior centers. Typically, we do try to give them to the libraries. Glen Rock's library just reopened, so I'm not sure if we have forms there. They're versed in that. I know Kate Klunk's office prepares forms, Senator Kristen Phillips Hill, her office will prepare forms. So we do have a lot of kind of spread with that. There's the state property tax rebate program, But we also send letters out for anybody that applied last year and was eligible or ineligible. We continue to mail those letters. So we do reach out as much as we can.
And then the charitable, so the one thing, a lot of those foundations, you have to be a 501c3, and although we are a government, we are not a 501c3. So that, a lot of times, we're not eligible from that standpoint. We do have the Southern York County School District Foundation, which we're both part of, that is a 501c3. So we could have money come there, and if it meets the criteria for the foundation, then it could be a benefit to the school district, because the foundation does benefit just the school district. But you're right, Mr. Henkel, we have to be careful, because a lot of times we can't have
Influence.
an influencer or subjectivity there. So I don't know that we would, for most of them, that we would qualify, because we're not a 501c3.
Okay. All right. Well, we will move to 3.01, which is a detailed presentation of the proposed options and recommendation for the 26-27 budget, as well as other financial items. I will turn it over to Ms. Green and Trevor.
Okay, thank you so much. And is everybody okay if we sit here?
Yes, please.
No, Jen and I stood her, just kidding.
Well, we don't have people 100 meters behind us.
Kidding.
If we had someone behind us, we would. Okay, so we're going to go quickly through these first couple slides, but for those watching from home, we just want to make sure that everybody understands we started this process back in November, where we presented a preliminary budget, really to make sure that we could make a recommendation for the board to stay within the PDE index of 4.4%. The board did approve that at the December meeting, and that was a requirement in order to receive the adequacy funding, which we found out about in November. So we've been giving updates throughout the winter, and then this presentation where we will update you from what has happened since November and what our recommendations are, with approval of a proposed budget in April, and then the final approved budget at the May meeting. So objectives for the presentation, we're going to talk about the current year budget, where we are right now, review changes to the budget since November, discuss major challenges, budget drivers that we have going on, talk about prioritization of student needs and enrollment, understand our revenue streams, and then explain those areas of vulnerability. We're going to actually start with that piece. We talked about those in the spring. We're going to start there so that you have that in your mind as we go through the rest of the presentation. And then we will present options and look for consensus so that we can bring the budget back in April. So from March of 2025, these were the vulnerabilities that we talked about. These continue to be our areas of extreme vulnerability. We have very little growth in real estate assessment, so when Mr. Carrington goes over our revenues later in the presentation, he'll talk about the real estate assessments and how we have very little growth in that area, in addition to having a lot of assessment appeals. Interest earnings continue to be a concern, both from the standpoint that we have less money in fund balance, so we have less money to invest, and it is at a lower interest rate. So probably the bigger piece on that, again, Mr. Carrington will talk about, is that there is less money to invest. So regardless of what the rates are, we would generate less revenue. And then state and federal funding. We all know, we all lived through the fall, and we didn't have a budget till the end of November. So for us to even think we have any idea what it's going to look like next year, we really don't. So it is a big question mark and guess out there. Expenditures, health insurance continues to be a challenge. We have another 15% increase, which I know you're all aware of. That was approved at the December meeting to move forward with that. And then we did remove the extra debt service in the budget for 25-26 that was allocated for building renovations and maintenance. So we need to take a look at how we're going to fund future building renovations going forward. So we're going to go pretty briefly through where we are now, because again, when we get to detailed revenues and expenditures, Trevor will talk about the specifics in those areas, but really looking at high-level view of revenues compared to budget. We have not hit we do not believe we're going to hit the budget for revenues for 25-26. We think we're going to be shy of about $344,000, and that's mainly due to local revenues. Again, the areas of earned income tax and assessment, and Mr. Carrington will talk more about that. So we're about 0.5% below where we're budgeted. Always want to be high on revenues, low on expenses, so that one's a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. On expenditures, we actually are about 2.5% below budget, so that is a good answer. But let me tell you why. Some of the reasons why we are below is because we consciously last summer, when we were looking at enrollment, going into the school year, if we had vacancies, there are a couple places we did not fill vacancies, so we did not fill about 2.6 positions. We did not fill one of the bus routes. So that did generate some of this budget savings, so that was a concerted effort to come in as low as possible, and we do that each year. So our summary of our projections, we are better than what we thought. So if you remember back to last year, we used about $2.7 million of fund balance to balance that budget. We actually are projecting that we will use about $1.4 million. So, but we will use fund balance. So that is a concern. So we're going to talk a little bit about going forward and using fund balance. So structural deficit is basically defined as when you use your spending is higher than what your revenue is in a particular period, but you take out those one-time things. So as you know, we do transfers to capital reserve from fund balance. We take out those things when we're looking at whether or not we have a structural deficit. It's really that previous slide. You're looking at operations, where are your revenues, where are your expenditures. So the next slide kind of shows where we have been over the last couple years. So if you think back to 22-23, we showed a surplus of about $3.4 million, but there's definite reasons why that was. One of the big reasons was we got a lot of federal funding that we knew was going to go away. So over about $1.4 million in federal funding, greater than what we have now. Additionally, we were not fully staffed in that we were losing folks faster than we could fill them because there weren't applicants. There were a lot of people that left during the pandemic. We were catching up with that. There were more jobs than there were applicants in the area of education, and so that's one of the reasons we did have a large surplus during 22-23, and we modified some use of fund balance and some things with our budgeting to try to not run those type of surpluses. 23-24, we used almost $2.5 million of federal funding, higher than what we have now. And again, we still were in that, we were better from a staffing standpoint, but not quite fully staffed. Fast forward to 24-25, where we really were, I know it's almost $1 million, but in the scope of, $66 million, we were at almost break-even standpoint from a budgeting standpoint. We were pretty much fully staffed, and our federal funding was about equal to where it is going forward. And then we look at 25-26, which we just explained. So as we're kind of moving forward, this is one of the things we want to make sure as we're going through the presentation that people understand. We want to be careful with this structural deficit and how we handle that moving forward. So I will turn it over to Mr. Carrington.
Thank you, Sue. So just to bring everybody back to where we were in November when Sue and I were here to present to the group, just as a reminder, and something Sue mentioned, the 25-26 starting point for the budget, 26-27's budget, it was less 2.6 full-time equivalent positions, and then that one bus route Sue mentioned. At that time, we had the $400,000 in contingency, and really the intent of that is just to make sure that we could stay within the PDE index of 4.4% for a tax increase. And again, at that time, we had a deficit that was right around $5 million before we considered the use of fund balance or any tax increase. So we're now here in March. There have been changes to the budget that we're bringing forward to you. That's what the rest of this presentation is going to be about, at least on my behalf. And then just to kind of touch on some of the areas, some of them are things we've talked about in January, so changes in rates or assumptions. We had that good PSERS news. We had that also good electricity news, just about some rate stabilization. But then some other things. So we're going to talk about where we are with staffing for the 26-27 year. We have a reduction of buses. That will be something we touch on. And then also we're included in this budget is the recommendation to bring back a classroom that's currently operated by the IU that is in Shrewsbury Elementary. So really that's going to be budget neutral the way we have it, but it's something we're recommending. And then Sue also mentioned the recommendation for some long-term capital project, just a plan. So really at this point, we have our base budget. So what we are presenting tonight is about $68.1 million. And if you had it, or could flip back a couple slides, that represents a decrease of just under $300,000 from the 25-26 budget. So that's a decrease of about 0.43%. So next year's budget is anticipated to be less than the current year 25-26 budget. Before we get into all the numbers, there's a couple building blocks, if you think about it, for our budget. The first one to mention, and I believe President Henkel brought this up, was enrollment. So you can see from that chart, and it is a little hard to read those numbers, but you can see from the trend line, we are declining in enrollment when you look at 15, 16, and then going to 2025, 26. So in 15, 16, and to reiterate, the blue line, that top line, that represents students we pay for. And then that bottom line, that orange line, represents students that are at Southern. So the kids that are showing up each day.
Numbers right here.
So in 15, 16, we were paying for about 3,164 total students, or ADMs. And then that number estimated now is 2,847. So overall, it's a reduction, about 153 less. But really the important part to see, we are declining in enrollment. We understand that, but really the difference between the two lines is pretty consistent. I have to go back. It was not 153 difference. That's the separation between the two lines. It's about 350 total less students from 15, 16 to 25, 26.
So from that, if I can
Yep.
just take a pulse, from that you're suggesting that it's really not, there's not been a significant change in parents in the district seeking alternative education. That's remained pretty consistent. What's been, the change has been a total drop in total students.
It's more that demographic shift, or there are just less students to attend school. So overall, the spread has been about consistent.
And the blue line includes
All students we pay for.
all,
So that would mean charter school students,
Lincoln Edge.
Lincoln Edge,
Private school.
private
Private
schools
school,
that we pay for.
so basically just about every available student.
But it would not include homeschool students. So I just wanted to clarify that. Would not, because we don't pay for homeschool students, it would not.
Sure. But the trend has been, they've really followed each other. Thank you.
Yep. And then this is an update from a chart that we presented last year. So last year, if you looked at that chart, it would show a steady line and then increasing. So last year, the projection was that we would be increasing to 2033, 2034. It was a kind of an upward tick. Now, that chart is very level. We're not seeing a big uptick. And again, this is an estimate we get from PDE. Some of the data that's used by PDE to build this projection would be actual enrollments for school districts, the birth data that they have available to them, and then retention rates, so those students that are staying in those schools. So again, this is something we get from PDE, but really what you can see, it's a pretty steady line. At the 2023, 2034, we're looking at about 2,800 students, which overall, when you think of 100 students between all 13 grade levels, it's not a huge shift at all.
And last year, this was trending
It's trending upwards.
up. So there hasn't been a material demographic change, so I mean,
They're just recognizing reality.
but, you know, understanding where this is heading is one of the most important things we can understand from a planning standpoint.
Yeah.
And there's nothing materially that changed in a year to where it should have gone from sloping up to flat, right? So I'm skeptical, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't trust their data.
Right, yeah, I was gonna say, frankly, these PDE estimates, I've always looked at them and thought, how are they coming up with this? How is this in any way connected to reality?
And one thing we might, and Trevor, Sue, and I discussed this, one thing we might need to look into is how do we get our hands on our own data that we're confident in?
Yeah,
Well, the national birth data does not look like this.
Yeah.
It has no up in it.
Which is how we know it's not.
and our district
No, that's
seems-
national, that's not
yeah.
Pennsylvania, but
And, yeah, and knowing what we know demographically about our district.
You think it'll be even more so, yeah.
So we talked about enrollment, which then leads into class size and student needs. So this is something the administrative team does every year. We work together to really understand and evaluate what needs do our students have. And it's not something that is just done at one level, so it's not looked at just at elementary, just at secondary. Elementary is reviewed, secondary is reviewed, all classes. That also includes special education classes and those other supports that students need. So what that gets us to is how is that impacting the budget? The budget we are bringing forward and presenting includes a reduction of 12 professional staff positions. So that would be 12 positions that are not in the budget for 26-27. It includes the reduction of 7 support staff positions that were removed from the budget. It's important to note, and then I'll mention a few times, these reductions are being done through attrition. So what that means would be a retirement or a resignation of that staff member. And again, this has been the result of extensive meetings throughout the school year with many administrators involved, really understanding the impact that these reductions will make for our class sizes and for our student population. You can see on the slide, there's a decrease in salaries of 1.63%, or about $472,000. That number is net of an increase relating to the district bringing on the MDS classroom that we're recommending from the intermediate unit, and it's also net of the standard salary increases we would have each year.
So one more time before we move on, tell us what attrition is and what attrition isn't. I think we just need to emphasize this point.
So attrition would be the reduction of staff due to any, so a retirement or a resignation, and attrition is not a layoff. So that wouldn't be someone, not Dr. Bryson going to somebody and saying, you no longer have a position here.
I want to make sure we're clear on that.
And I'll reiterate it one more time. So where do these positions come from? It is from attrition. So it would be somebody that has retired or resigned throughout the school year. And again, 12 professional staff positions. This 12 does not include that 2.6 we mentioned before. That was already included in the budget we had in November. So this would be an additional amount. And the 12 positions are spread throughout the district. They're secondary core subjects, they're elective courses, special education staff. There are also elementary classroom teachers and other specialist positions. The support staff positions that are being removed from the budget are represented from paraprofessional positions, along with positions on the operations side of the organization. So that would be operations, maintenance, or technology. So again, I think it's my last time, but these would all be through attrition. So how does this impact our enrollment and staffing? We thought it was important to show our elementary enrollment and how this fits and staffing reductions would fit into our board policy, which is 25 students. So per policy, the average class size, an elementary building cannot exceed 25 students. That does not mean there won't be a scenario where a class won't exceed 25 students, but on average, the class size should not exceed 25 students, and the priority is made for a smaller class size at grades K1 and 2. Really, this chart that you can see, it is a little difficult, but if you can look on your slide or your handout, the estimated class size for next school year would be anywhere from 22.1 to 22.4 to 21.2, just based off our 3 buildings. And how does that compare to 2018-19? It's pretty consistent. We had a building with 23, one with 22, one with 19.2, but those are real numbers and they're real students. So it's not always going to be perfect. You won't have that great average that you can look at.
And we actually estimated the kindergarten class a little high, just to make sure that we weren't going, that we understood probably the higher end.
Can I ask a question maybe for Dr. Reppert or Dr. Bryson? Is there any trigger on the low side? Because I've heard just anecdotes from parents where a couple kids get moved here, a couple kids get moved here. Next thing you know, there's like low double-digit kids in a class. What do we do in that scenario?
So, we talking about like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, primary grades? Is that
First, second?
We're typically in the high teens, but you could get to 20 where you have 2 more pop in. The challenge with our district, it's a good and there's bad. The good, our community has always been pretty strong for community schools for the 3 elementaries. The bad with that is you don't have a lot of room to move kids around because you may have only 2 classrooms in one building, 3 in another, and maybe, at max 4 in another. So balancing those numbers becomes a challenge.
I'm asking on the opposite side. So and this is just an anecdote,
Sure.
but if class is getting down to like 11 or 12.
I don't know if an 11 or 12.
Maybe in the high school?
Could be in the high school.
Okay.
Could be in the high school.
Because a particular subject that's not
Foreign language,
that popular.
that happens.
But if you started out in kindergarten with 16 and you've got 4 kids gone, you're quickly to 12, potentially. I don't think you see that happen very often, but.
Dr. Bryson, I have a follow-up question if I could. So regarding attrition in positions that will not be filled, I have concerns about special education specifically and behavioral support, especially among the elementary age students. What does that look like for teachers? Are we taking something away from them that they depend on every day and absolutely have to have?
I think that would depend on who you talk to. And I say that with the idea that, so the special ed services that we currently provide, we must continue to provide. But they may not look exactly the same as they are today. For instance, if we have an emotional support classroom and we have a position we're not filling, it doesn't mean we're not filling it with someone else that's currently in the district teaching something else. But that emotional support service would need to be filled. Could we potentially combine a section that was relatively small with another section? Yes. We've got to stay within state mandated rostering, so a special ed teacher can only have X number of students on their roster. We're well below that. I can speak to that. But we are trying right now to stay away from cutting some of or not filling positions where we feel our staff need the support. But sometimes that means everybody's caseload goes up a little more. Or instead of having 20 students in the class, I now have 23 or 24. That is a real reality of the challenge we have.
And when you were discussing with other administrators that are running the buildings, what did they think about those type cuts, that they're not going to be able to fill these positions? What kind of feedback did you get?
Literally, as Mr. Carrington pointed out, we've met almost every other week for the past 4 months. So any position that becomes either a resignation, retirement, what have you, that position is discussed. And the purpose in meeting so frequently is sometimes we are shifting where those positions may come from based upon recent resignations, where, okay, we now have a greater priority and we need to shift again. Our administrative team holistically has been 100% supportive of the mission that we have, the call that has to be made. Nobody wants to lose staff. The superintendent doesn't want to lose staff. Going back to the original presentation, what makes Southern special? It is the staff and their empathy and their support, and it's what makes education what it is. And it's how we maximize it. With that being said, we're recognizing we've got far lower numbers of kids than we had in 2015. And staffing has been going down, meaning we're not just continuing to hire, but not at the rate at which student enrollment has gone down. So I think we recognize that. I know we recognize that, and our principals have been supportive, even moving potentially people from buildings to different levels, and having discussions about who might be most successful giving the position we're trying to accommodate for. Again, if it was up to the adults, I'm just saying this, we'd never lose positions through attrition, ever, right? Because we all want small class sizes. We've become accustomed to that, but we have to recognize the reality. It's a $5 million budget deficit. So those discussions, while serious, are amicable. And if somebody really sticks up for a position, they're going to have to justify it, and they're going to have to justify it to one that's over here that may or may not be in their building. So.
I have a clarifying question. So when you were talking about the enrollment, you were saying at 25, but it could be more than that. But I was looking at our policy, and I'm just trying to understand, because I don't really understand how it reads. So it says the average class size in each elementary attendance center of the school district, K through 6, shall not exceed 25 students. The superintendent will have the flexibility in applying these guidelines to specific grades, but shall give priority to smaller class sizes in the primary K through 2 grades. So I feel like the first statement is clear, but then I feel like the second statement makes it a little bit ambiguous, and I just wondered what our policy was.
So here's how your superintendent handles this. We're going to take our classes, everyone we have, and we're going to divide it by the number of kids we have. And so that better be 25 or below for the entire elementary population. But when we start talking about numbers, and kindergarten might be at 18 or whatever, 17 for an average, that means your 5th and 6th grade is going to be closer to 30. And that's how it's modified to accommodate that policy. It is not cut and dry, because you could eliminate our ability to do anything in the sense of, we don't know how many kids we're going to take on between now and the start of the school year or throughout the year. So usually that's why you don't have the average is going to be this at this grade, this and that. We literally couldn't follow it. Whereas this is more broad, there is some flexibility there.
And this is how we have always implemented that. Like, that's been in place for a long, long time, and that's how we've always implemented.
So keep going. This is just a chart showing all of our professional staff. So all of our staff, actually. And it shows administrators, professional staff. salaried staff that aren't teachers, our support staff. So that includes technology, paraprofessionals, maintenance, custodial. So you can see 25, 26, we have 375 total staff, 0.3. And then next year, we're include the budgeted number, which is 357. So how does that look if you take our enrollment compared to professional staff? Next year, it's looking at about 12 and a half professional staff or students to staff. And then if you look back to 09, 2010, it's 12.75. And then not so long ago, 18, 19, it was 13.5. So really, we're within a range, not like about one student different or one staff member different from 18, 19 compared to 26, 27.
And I just want to point something out about 18, 19. So when we're looking at the school district compared to other businesses, when there's a recession that happens, we always lag behind that because of a lot of our funding comes from other places. So in 18, 19, we had not started adding back any positions yet from the recession. And so that's probably our highest staff to student ratio. And that has to do with, we were holding, because what we did not want to do is hire back staff and then get in a position where we couldn't keep them and have to lay off. So we were on a holding pattern at that point in time.
Is that kind of more methodology, like just being cautious in that, like a...
Well, I call it slow and deliberate change. Okay. Yes, so, yes, we want to be, when we're making change, we want to be slow and deliberate. So even then, when we got to 1920, we want to do one or two positions, just very slowly to make sure that, again, our enrollment supports it, but also that we have the funding to support it.
All right, so I spent a lot of time talking about staffing. Staffing is one of the most important pieces of our budget. Salary and benefits, which is this slide, make up about 69% of our budget. So it's important for us to spend a lot of time really digging into that and talking through it. For employee benefits, the other piece of that, we have a decrease this year, so for next year's budget, of about $46,000. This is made up of two different pieces going in different directions. So health insurance, we've talked about last year, that was a vulnerability. It continues to be that. We have a approved health insurance increase rate of 15%. That happened in December. Really, the budget increase for next year is $465,000. You look at that number and it says 7.5%. That's because that's net of changes. So if we don't have all of those positions coming back, that number did decrease to get us to that 7.5% over current budget. So again, budget increase for health insurance is offset with a budget decrease in PSERS and Social Security. So that's made up of two things. One, the same staffing thing we've discussed, but also the PSERS rate was recertified in December. That was that favorable change we talked about at the January board meeting. So right now, PSERS, the retirement system, all of our staff are required to participate, and we as a school district pay 34.34 for every salary dollar, so about a third. It did go down to 33.59%, so that did yield us some pretty good savings. And overall, the reduction in PSERS and Social Security from that plus a reduction in staff is down about $429,000. Next in our budget, we have something called purchase services. So purchase services come in three different categories. We'll have professional services, property services, and other services. So that increased by about $100,000, less than 1%. So the biggest drivers there would be contracted professional services, up about $80,000. That's made up of a couple things. One would be athletic training services. That was something we approved, I believe, last month. And then another would be speech services. So one of those positions that isn't in the 26-27 budget is a speech position, and it's being offset with contracted services, so we still meet the same needs of the students. Also, we have student tuition and placements. That's up $57,000, but that's part of that is only up $57,000 because we are bringing that IU classroom back, or proposing to bring that back. Student transportation, it doesn't look like it's up by that much, $21,000, that's good news. But really, it's two pieces going in different directions. We have a large decrease with our first students or district transportation. We removed the bus, didn't fill that this year, and then this year's budget includes a reduction of 2 more buses. So a total of 3 compared to 24-25 have been removed from the budget. That's offset with a large increase in our IU transportation. We contract with the IU for some of our special needs transportation. Then we do have liability insurances, so that would be property insurance, stuff like that. That is a favorable decrease, so saving money there of about $46,000, and that is related to just some market stabilization. Rates aren't increasing near to the point we saw them increasing over the last several years. So I mentioned purchased, that other purchase services. So what's that? Transportation goes in there, but the biggest other item would be kind of tuition and placements for our students. So this is one of our larger budget items. It's about $6 million for 26-27, or about 8.8% of total expenditures. And what does this really mean? We have tuition that we pay to the York County School of Technology. So that was a favorable item this year. We have less students attending York Tech, so we had some budget savings. The IU, those are typically special education students. That number would have gone up, but we are recommending to bring back the MDS classroom, so that would yield some kind of neutral but cost savings there. We do have placements to other districts or other educational placements. That went up about $160,000. And then charter and cyber school students, really that was neutral for us, neutral in a way. So we did save money there with the new rate, but we continue to have students attending those schools, which is money going out the door to those schools. Supplies and equipment, really the highlight here, we have a couple big cost drivers. We've beat up the fact that our utility costs are going up. That is natural gas and electricity, and that is really on that wholesale rate increase. And just the rate increase, it's not as much utilization, but really it has to do with just the cost of electricity or the cost of natural gas. Couple reductions, diesel fuel. I will note we have 75% of our diesel fuel hedged for the 26-27 school year.
100% if they would have listened
If they
to
would have
Wise
listened to us,
guy.
yes, it would have been 100%. We did have a fuel call today, and we did not recommend a purchase because I don't believe there's any fuel for them to give us next year at this point. Joking, there will be, but it was not an advantageous buy today. So
Versus the buy that you made in
versus the
December
buy
of
we made
$3.
of I think $2.05. So it is a good bit higher today.
I still am going to have to get used to utilities being under supplies and equipment. That's going to be
And a lot of, and just
Adaptation for
to, just to take this step back, we are presenting the way that we have to kind of account for these and budget for these. Not our rules. We didn't make it up. This is really just the way PDE wants us to show this information.
there's some stuff more expensive than paper clips in there.
Yes. All right, so we can kind of keep rolling through our expenditures, and I will present our new items in the budget. Some years for those watching or the board members, this could be a long list. We might have many items. Right now, we have really 2, and it's a low dollar amount. So for $6,900, we would have included a replacement plan for AEDs and radios. We brought a one-time purchase this year for, I believe, 4 AEDs. This would be adding some money to that budget, so we don't have to have as many one-time purchases. Same with radios, just kind of putting additional money in the budget so we can buy those as needed each year. Really, just to bring us home, it felt like it was several minutes ago we talked about salaries. So again, salaries, that big decrease of just under $500,000 primarily relates to that. reduction of staff offset with just the standard increases. Benefits, two big things there would be that 15% increase in medical insurance offset with that big decrease in the PSERS and FICA, really as a reduction of staff. Have purchase services, it's $100,000 or a little under $100,000, doesn't look like a big increase, but a lot of ups and downs throughout that category. Supplies and equipment, that's really those utilities, pretty much made most of that up. And then the rest of the budget, nothing is really changing there.
Is there anything on there where we obviously couldn't plan for it, but it could surprise us in a positive way at the end of the budget year? If you were to pick one category, say, hey, I can't plan for it, I can't bank it, but here's a category that could surprise us to the upside.
I've been around
Question.
her, and have you seen the smirk on her face? That's a no.
What's that? That's a what?
That's a polite
She's like, if I
no.
told you, it wouldn't be same
No,
day.
no, I actually thought of something, but I was like,
She usually sends me out of her office at that point.
no, I thought of something. Okay, so
Yeah.
the only thing I could think of is, with placements, it would be great if some of our families came back from some of the placements that they're at, and that could be a positive if we're able to bring them back from programs, or, if they're at a charter school and they decide to come to our schools, that could be positive.
Okay.
We have,
Could be positive.
instead of a charter school, we do work with IU for Lincoln Edge, which to my understanding is very similar to charter school programming. So if that is the, what that family or student is looking for, we do have an alternative. For us, it benefits, it's a lower cost, so just a different option.
I don't think there's any big shifts that we could even say, oh, we'll keep an eye on this, that might be a big shift. But even the LIU classroom, some might be asking, well, if it's a net break even, why bring it back? Well, A, it's here already. It's more taking on the staffing that supports the kids right now. And that would be, well, okay, potentially there could be seats available in the program that other districts are then contracting with us to service.
Can I throw a bone out there, potentially, possibly? So, we're using from fund balance, 1.4 roughly million. If we are successful in selling the property in New Freedom, that would more than replenish, because it has to be used for buildings if that sale happens. And that would more than replenish that number and even give us a little bit surplus. I would hope, we paid about 2 million for that originally.
Yeah, I think we want to be, so we're on the expenditure side. I think there's more room for possible good news on the revenue side. So Dr. Brayson's example of students coming to our classroom, we could get revenue from that. The land would bring us revenue. So I think there's a little more room on the revenue side than the expenditure side. I think really probably the only opportunity on the expenditure side is that having families come back and not having placement costs. But when we get to the revenue side, which we're going to do next, I think there are some more opportunities for some positive potentials that we'll keep an eye out for.
Sorry if I stole any thunder there.
That's okay, that's okay. I just want
You
to make sure yeah.
So next up is revenues. We have two big pieces to the budget. We spend a lot of time on expenditures, next are revenues. So really here's a chart over showing the last 5 years of our revenues broken out, state, local, federal, and then others relatively small, so we're not going to really spend too much time. What is this chart showing? So really, if you look at it, comparing 23, 24 to the year before, 22, 23, we had a 3% increase in revenue. That's pretty good. In several categories, it went up in federal, went up in state, went up in local. So overall, good news. Going from 23, 24 to 24, 25, it's kind of like we slammed on the brakes. Federal went down. We knew that would go down. That was our COVID ESSER money and the spending that was planned. Our state revenue, that did increase a sizable amount, so we saw some good money there from state revenues, and then our local revenues were flat. Pretty flat when you're looking at $42 million, or 43 compared to 43 the year before. And really, that's a 0.69% increase in our revenues. Projecting for 25-26, we have that just about same percentage, but the other way. So we are looking at still favorable kind of on the state side, a reduction on the federal side, but again, we expected that. And really the bad news is that our local revenue is going down. And then when we look at next year's budget, it truly is flat. So 0.07% when you're looking at a $65 million budget, it's very little change. Local revenues are down, state is increasing a little bit, and then federal, that's staying the same. So we're gonna look into these pieces a good bit more. We thought it would be helpful to present what is our budget, like kind of what does our budget look like? This is a different view of the pie chart we've shared in the past. So we have our local, state, and federal. Local is about 2/3 of our revenue, state about 1/3, federal, it shows as 1%, but it's really less than 1%. And then we're gonna break out and show what are our local revenues as a whole. Property taxes make up 78% of our local revenues, or about 50% of our overall budget. Earned income then is 16% of our local revenue. Interest earnings is 2%, and that's right now. There are other years where interest earnings would really be grouped in with that other because it was $22,000. And then that other piece would be about 4%.
What
So-
are some examples of the other piece?
Other might be our IDEA funding from the Lincoln Intermediate Unit, our athletic ticket revenue, some of those little grants if a PTO wanted to donate a Gaga ball pit, that. So not a huge ton of things. Do you have any other?
Yeah, I think it's mainly those types of smaller.
Is there any single item that's like the largest? Because 4% is not.
It's
huge
gonna
amount
be
of
the
budget, but it's
IDEA
it's a lot of
has-
money.
is
The IDEA
federal.
is the biggest one. Okay.
Well, IDE is federal, but because it comes from the IU and not the federal government, we have to record it as a local revenue.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's-
the
that's
biggest
the
chunk of
bulk.
that 4%.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
One question. How are we doing with delinquent taxes that are owed?
Which ones?
Well, I know-
Probably real estate, like the property.
Oh, for sure, yes. Like Lutheran Trust, right? That was a really big one. So, no hope of recovery at all.
So we turn our properties over to York County tax claim, and we do that every year. It's part of the process in January. I don't believe I've seen any news on that Lutheran Social at this point, but there is a process in Pennsylvania in the property tax law where you do have to make payment, or you go to sheriff's sale, things like that, so.
So let me just kind of comment on that. So when you go to like some of the professional organization conferences, you always have someone there that wants to buy your real estate taxes that are delinquent. We would never want to sell ours because we will get the money. So in Southern New York, there is property behind that tax. And so at worst case scenario, if the owner continues not to pay, the property will be sold, and we get first dibs on the money when it's sold. And so we will always get our money, and we always do, even if I've seen it, usually it's within a year. I've seen it take up to 4 years, but we always generally get our money because there's property behind it in Southern New York. Some other districts, it might be blighted and there is no value to it, but we're not, that's not us. So we always end up getting our money that's just potentially delayed, but usually it's pretty quick within a year for us.
How do you feel about changes coming from Harrisburg, discussions that are happening about removing property tax and bringing revenue to school districts in another fashion? schools?
I can say, since, and I know Sue has said this before, that's been a topic of conversation since she's been in school business. I can say when I started in school business about 10 years ago,
Not saying
that was coming, and that was something that we expected would happen later that year, and that was in 2018. So
You'll believe it when you see it.
I will believe it when I see it.
Your breath.
It's literally been the whole 25 years I've been.
The revolution that's been coming for 25
5
years,
years,
we'll have to
yeah.
wait another 25.
Yeah, and so let me just comment on it. I would say even Act One, which is your homestead farmstead, it was probably, I'd have to go back and look, but it was probably close to 12 years. We got the same allocation in year one as we got in year 12. Now, on a positive note, because I like to be positive, that has been a good thing. There is more money coming from that. So I think that's a good mechanism to get it back to people that use their property for their to reside in as their primary residence. And so that's been a positive thing. We have been getting more money. And that is a good way to lower property taxes in that way. So I think that is a good mechanism to come from the state to us, and we distribute it through homestead farmstead, so.
It's a hot button issue because, I mean, in order to make the numbers work, they would have to tax retirement income in Pennsylvania.
Some, not all. But at the same time, there's meetings that are happening that haven't been happening before. So are the legislators contacting the administration to discuss it and get your opinion and what you think?
I'll have to see if I can pull it up, but I probably have like at least 5 reports of when they had a study or council on this, like the last 5 times. But
So nothing recent.
yeah, and I don't want to be cynical, but it's such a huge, back to slow and deliberate. Instead of biting the whole thing off, like we've got to make movement towards it. So we've made some with this homestead farmstead. So I think, kind of looking at, it's such a huge animal.
So maybe another 20 years.
Well, and talking with one of our local reps about it, from their perspective, this is really a southern part of Pennsylvania problem, not a northern part of Pennsylvania problem. So it's really hard to get your northern representatives behind it because it's really a southern Pennsylvania issue. So that's why.
Because of property values or because of
So-
demographics or?
I own a property up in Clinton County. I think the property taxes are $375.
So
Who cares, right? They're not $10,000. So it's hard for them to get traction in the House because half of the state doesn't care. That was his perspective.
Well, because there's been a hold harmless provision in Pennsylvania pretty much since time began. So if I used to have 5,000 students and I now have 1,000 students, I didn't get any subsidy taken away. So that's why your tax bill's $300 and some. Because you're getting subsidy that really should go with the children, but it's not. And everyone thinks, like we hear it all the time, like, oh, well, you're losing students, you're losing subsidy. Not really, because, not that we get that much, because we don't, as Trevor just showed, but that's really the issue, is all those parts of the state that lost students 20, 25, 30, 35 years ago, never lost any of the money that went with it, because it's been hold harmless, so your bill's $300 and some.
We're not solving that, I can
Yeah.
tell you that.
No, that's beyond our ability to.
The other challenge too is there are a lot of negatives that come with the state taking over the majority of your funding.
Yes.
Like we experienced with our just 34%, that we don't have a budget until November. Just how do you run how do you do that when that's now? Well, your urban centers, that is the case. They're trying to run a district and getting 70% or whatever the number might be from a state source. So there's some true negatives that go along with that.
Because that distribution could become,
So let me.
Whatever
let me
they decide it to be, and if you want to make your district better, where are you coming up with you know,
Let me go back real quick. We'll stay off task just another couple seconds here. So that's why I go back to this homestead, farmstead piece, because that is announced in April each year. So we will know that by the end of April, how much homestead, farmstead we get. We then get that in August. And so if we use that as a mechanism, if the state would use that as a mechanism to send more money to us for property tax relief, we know how much it is, we get it, and we distribute it through the tax bills on July 1st, because it's lowering your tax bill. And so that, we still maintain our control, and we get the money, and we know how much it is. So that is a good, versus some of these other models, like state sales tax, like when are we gonna get it? It's so far in arrears, and like they're concerning. But if you could funnel more money into the homestead farmstead, it's going to your primary residence owners, and the mechanism is ahead of the budget, which is great.
And it's not only impacting the person with a fixed income, but it is impacting the person with a fixed income, living in the home they've lived in for 40 years or whatever.
As
They're
their,
in-
as their
they're in-
primary
Yeah,
residence.
they're in
yes.
that group.
But if they happen
that
to be
gets taxed.
someone that has a house in Florida and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, then they're not going to get all those because they don't have that need.
Right.
The same. Yes.
It's good to discuss, because, you know, we talk to our legislators, and we want to represent well, and if we don't ask you those questions, we are not going to know what to say. So thank you for that.
Yep, absolutely.
So to keep us rolling, we have our chart that we've showed for several years on our district's assessment. So it's helpful to remind just everybody, because not everybody does this every day, that we tax based on assessment, and assessment is not the value of your home. So it's not the fair market value, it's not what you could turn around and sell your home for. It is what the county assessment office deems the assessment to be. So the red lines, they show the value of the district's assessment, and you can see it's not really moving as of late. And then that black line is just the percent change. So for 25-26, it is projected at 0.346% over 24-25. So under that 50% or 0.5% growth. And then next year is really at that 3-year weighted average of right around 0.5%. So it's 0.546%. So this is just really showing we were growing. That 21-22 shows a lot of growth that we had, and it has tapered off to the point where it is very slow growth in our assessment. We've talked at previous presentations, why is this assessment growth the way it is? It has to do with properties becoming exempt, properties appealing. We have many reasons why properties are becoming exempt, but overall, it is really negating a lot of that growth we have.
So if, you know, I read a lot of stuff, and some well-followed economists are expecting a dip in home values. But if there's not a county-wide assessment, that doesn't directly translate into our assessments, right?
Yeah.
And to go to Steph Musser's question about newer properties versus older properties, the issue there is really, it's the assessment issue, right? So because York County hasn't done an assessment since Lincoln was president, those homes that were, you know, purchased 20 years ago, they're on a certain baseline, and then they grow every year in their assessment versus a home that was built in 2019. They start at a higher baseline, don't they? Isn't that how it works?
No, so the last assessment, don't quote me, it was somewhere around 2006 in the county. We get it afterwards, so it's like 2006, 2007, something like that. And so at that point in time, if a property was built, that is the assessment, unless there were changes made to the property, like additions done or something removed or whatever.
Right, so my house was built in 2000, or 2001, so it's the
That was the
2006 assessment.
As long as you didn't do anything to your house, like put a fence up or a building or whatever, it's the same assessment that happened in 2006-ish. So fast forward, so what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to, say your house was built in 2020. They're supposed to take the same basis of those that were assessed before and apply it. And I think they try really hard, but it's difficult to do that. And so it should be on the same basis, and they have a ratio that looks at what market value is to try to pull that assessment down to what it, so let's say it's worth 300,000 and the ratio is 0.8, then they will multiply that and try to get you back down to what the assessment was in 2006.
Yeah,
And-
they don't do a
yes.
very good job of that, because there's one section of my development that was built right around 2000. There's another one that was built like maybe 2012, and that similar square footages, and it's night and day on the taxes.
It's challenge. It's a challenge, and not something we even can do anything about because we don't do assessment. But yes, that in theory is the way it's supposed to work. And I think we had a discussion with Mr. Decker too. In that last assessment, in the early 2000s, what happened was property values were going up for residential properties very quickly, and commercial properties were declining. And so what happened in that assessment is all the commercial and industrial properties went way down, the residential properties went way up, and then as a school district, you had to equalize your revenue. And so what that did was that put the burden more on residential properties than on commercial and industrial properties. So that's some of the challenges that occur.
So to show it in a different way, showed assessment, this is real estate revenues. I forget the percent on my slide a couple of slides ago. Real estate revenues make up a really big chunk. I know it's about 50% of the overall budget. So this slide represents the change in our current interim delinquent taxes plus homestead farmstead. We're going to touch more on homestead farmstead, but we needed to include it to actually give you an idea of what the impact really looks like, because as we mentioned, the state's been increasing that over the last several years. Really what this is showing, compared to our budget for 25-26, we're flat, so it's $6,500 less. And compared to our projections for this year, we are actually down. The reason we are down is primarily due to our interim taxes. We're just not seeing that assessment growth. So if we're not seeing assessment, we're not able to bill on interims, which is part of this whole calculation. So really, over time, it has gone down, it's level, and then it's really hard to see. But those years where we did have a tax increase, obviously, those would be the years where you do see an uptick in our tax revenue. I think it's 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, and then again in 21, 22, and nothing for those years after that. So another piece of our revenue pie, of our local revenue, would be our earned income tax. So what this chart is doing, it's just showing our current earned income tax just over time. You could see it did go up in some of the previous years. So 1920 went all the way up until 23, 24, but then in 24, 25, again, like I mentioned on that earlier slide, we hit the brakes and we pretty much came in equal, a little bit lower. So what did that do? It made us recalculate our projections, recalculating next year's budget. Overall, how does that impact us? We have a decrease budget to budget of under $300,000, so $274,000, or a decrease of about 3.84%.
And the big challenge on earned income taxes is that we do not get the majority of this until after the budget's passed. So it's not like we can look at it and say, where are we trending so far this year? We don't get most of it until after the budget's already passed.
So interest earnings, if we went 3 or 4 years ago, we would say, look, interest earnings are great, but we're worried because at some point we're not going to have money, and we are earning money by having that growing fund balance. So we're including in next year's budget a decrease in interest earnings, about $310,000. which is a big percent, so about 28% decrease. Really, this is driven by two things, but the biggest of those would be we're spending our money. So we have funds assigned for capital projects. We know that. It was a vulnerability we've talked about. We've talked about it in many presentations. The faster we spend down our fund balance, for whatever reason, the less money we have to invest. Rates do play a factor, but the bigger thing to kind of point out, as we have less money to invest, we have less money to make on our investments. So that was really a lot on our local revenues. Now we have that other third of our revenue structure would be our state revenues. Budget to budget, overall state revenues are up about $220,000, right under 1%. And how did we get there? So we talked about this last month at the board meeting. The governor brings forth his proposed budget in February. It's really important to reiterate, this is a proposed budget from the governor. It's kind of his first draft. Rarely is that what ends up being the final budget. And it's also important to know it isn't approved on time. It would be wonderful if it was, but this year we found out what the budget would be in November, and that makes everything really difficult. So again, not knowing until November throws a wrench in some things. So here's what we do as a district. Our basic ed and special ed funding, we take what we are receiving this year, so 25-26, and we increase it by 2%. That's $138,000 compared to the 25-26 budget. It's important to know, while that is our methodology and what we do, if you looked at exactly what the governor had in his budget, his increase for us for BEF and SEF is lower than 2%. So why do we do that? What we don't do would be budget his increase in the Ready to Learn block grant funding. So this chart is really just trying to show you some of the different funding streams that have been in the budget and haven't been in the budget. So the first one, Ready to Learn block grant, that is one of those new programs that they have been funding over the last several years. If you start at the beginning in 23-24, and for many years prior to that, it's right under $400,000. In 24-25 for the first year, got about $520,000 more. And that was great, that was helpful. Then we learned in November that we were getting more, so we had an additional $520,000. For the 26-27 budget, we are keeping it at that 25-26 funding rate because of our methodology with increasing that basic ed and special ed funding by 2%. Next line is charter school subsidy. Didn't have it in 23-24. Surprise, you get it in 24-25. Oh wait, by the way, you're not going to get it anymore. It's gone. It's not in 25-26 or 26-27. Really, we benefited because there was the change in the charter school funding calculation. So you won't see that on this slide. But overall, it's part of the inconsistency with the state budgeting methodology. We can't just assume what was in there one year is going to be in there the next year. Next, we have our FICA and PSERS reimbursement. So just to explain, we as a district get 50% back from our PSERS and FICA expense. So that's a good thing. But when we go down in our PSERS expense and our FICA expense, because our salaries have been reduced and we have staffing reductions, that amount also goes down. So really, this is just kind of showing you year over year, last 4 years, where those amounts have come in. All right, we did talk about Homestead Farmstead a little bit. We're going to spend time on 2 slides just to show you how that impacts our taxpayers. So over the last several years, as Mrs. Green has mentioned, the state has been increasing the amount they're giving to the district for the Homestead Farmstead property tax reduction. So to the district, that's neutral. We get more money for Homestead Farmstead and we reduce our real estate tax revenue. So it's a zero, it washes. But to the taxpayer, it does result in a reduction of their taxes. So for any Homestead Farmstead qualifying property, since 2021, the tax that they would have had would have paid on their home has decreased by about $136. So again, that's from 21-22 to 25-26. To show that in a different way, we have what you would see on your property tax bill. So if we go back to 21-22, what the calculation would look like for a median assessed property, so that's the $184,320. It's not a number we pick. It is given to us from the county under a median homestead assessed property. Assessed value is that 184. It's reduced by homestead exclusion. In 21-22, that exclusion was $9,000. So the net assessment was $175,275, and really the tax on that would be $3,490 using this year's tax rate. In 25-26, same calculation using the new amount that they give us for that homestead farmstead reduction. It reduces the assessment value, so the calculation of that, from 184 to 168, and the tax impact of that is $316. So really, what does that do? You take the difference between the two. There's a $136 reduction in the property tax paid by our qualifying taxpayers in Southern New York County School District. So if you apply for the Homestead Farmstead program, which means you live in your house, you don't own it here, live in Florida, or rent it, those don't qualify. What does qualify are the normal run-of-the-mill homeowners that live in Southern New York County School District.
Did we have one tax increase in that time frame, or was it just before that?
I believe it was the year before that.
Okay.
21-22, there was a tax increase.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, because it's showing the same tax liability for both years.
Yeah, I think it was right before that, or
Okay.
the other chart would show. So that was state, federal. It's really quick. I don't need to talk too much about that. I've taken up enough of our time. Federal, it's level. So it's only $469,000 of our revenue. It's not a huge increase. Not much to talk about. It's our title program, so Title I, Title II, Title IV. It's, again, it's flat. Not much to talk about through there. And then really to get closer to ending, to wrap it up, we have our grants. So it's important to highlight some of our grants. We have that PCCD grant that was approved in the 25-26 budget. That is used for funding for a social worker and a portion of a psychologist. Cool part about how this grant works, we can use it, so it came out in this year's budget, but we are able to use it for 24 months. So this is some budget certainty that we have with the state, which is rare. We are able to use that and have it in the 26-27 budget for those two positions, or 1.5. We have that Ready to Learn block grant adequacy funding. So in the Commonwealth's budget this year, it did go up $520,000. That application was submitted, I believe, in January. And it just continues to add to that amount we had of $906,000 in the year before. And then lastly, we have the Public Facility Improvement Grant. We were so fortunate a couple years ago to receive that for our middle school roof. Working with SiteLogic, they did submit the application for upcoming projects. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that brings some more favorable news to the district. But then, as always, we're always reviewing those grant opportunities to help our district kind of balance out that revenue puzzle. I will turn it back over to Sue.
Give Trevor a break now. So budget summary, we're going to summarize really quickly what Trevor just went over. Overall, our expenditures for the 26-27 budget are down about $300,000 or 0.43%, so a little less than half a percentage point. Includes removing 12 professional staff positions, 7 support staff positions, 2 additional buses, and reducing building and area budgets. The main increases in expenditures are due to contracted education and health insurance. Our revenues are very slight, in some areas slightly declining. But it does not include any amount or millage for future building updates. So at this point, we do not have anything in there for additional building renovations. So the proposed budget summary, if you look at the revenues and expenditures together, we're now at a deficit of about $2.8 million based upon the new numbers. So at this point, we're going to take a look at different budget option decisions. And we think there's 4 areas we need to look at. The first being the use of fund balance, the second being the amount to include for future building maintenance or updates, the third being whether or not to have a tax increase, and if so, what that would look like, and the fourth being additional staffing or program reductions to balance the budget. So we'll start with use of fund balance. So you've seen this chart before, just really rolling forward our fund balance from July 1st to the beginning of this fiscal year, about $27 million. We transferred money for the projects that were already approved. We have some money left to pay out in the high school project, and then we have the projected utilization of fund balance for this fiscal year, which puts us to about $16 million left in fund balance. So we had talked about earlier in the presentation use of fund balance, possibly the concerns over a structural deficit. We were using a fund balance methodology of 1% of revenues and 3% of expenditures, but that was during the time when we were not fully staffed and we had a lot of vacancies in the budget. At this point, we don't have that. We were pretty much 100% staffed throughout the year, so we are recommending that we change the fund balance methodology back to what we had before, which would be 1% of revenues and 1.5% of expenditures, or a not to exceed of about $1.7 million in round numbers. Because we're at about $2.7 million right now, one way that we could accomplish that is recommend a phase-in plan to get back to that level of fund balance to balance the budget, not necessarily doing it in a one-year plan. So one potential way to do that, reducing our reliance on fund balance, is to look at the phase-in for 26-27 of using $2 million, and then the following year for 27-28, getting it down to that $1.7 million. While I do think we could phase it in slightly, don't think it should be a long-term thing because we really need to get back to our revenues covering operations closer than what they are. Second piece on those decisions slide would be looking at a facility plan. So this is the slide that was presented at last month's board meeting. We have already transferred the money, the $8 million for the build for 2026 over to capital reserve. That was approved by the board. So it's the next 2 columns that total about $19.2 million that we don't have funding for at this point in time. So it's really what we're going to be looking at. And at this week's board meeting, there'll be another presentation by Mr. Buffington and Site Logic kind of zeroing in on these projects. But whatever is decided for future projects is recommended that we have a plan in place on how to fund those. So again, looking at possible ways to put a plan in place for the issuance of bonds would approximately, you need approximately $1 million in place to get $20 million, or approximately 1.5 mils for $30 million. And so looking at a potential phase-in plan, would recommend that we do that sooner than later. So for 26-27, you could start with 1/10 of a mil and then do an additional 1/4 mil for the years going forward to try to get closer to having that millage in place to pay the bonds. If you do a phase-in plan, kind of like what we did last time, while you're phasing it in, that money will flow into fund balance. That money can be used for capital projects at that time. and it will reduce your overall reliance on issuing bonds. So it's kind of a win-win because you're planning and putting it in place slowly and deliberately versus all in one fell swoop, but it also allows you to put money back for those projects. So kind of at home where you do a little saving, a little borrowing, not all of one or the other. So history of tax increases, we were kind of talking about when the last time we had a tax increase. I think some of you were saying, so it was 21-22 is a 2.68%. So, you know, looking at the chart overall, we have, over the last 10-year period, we've had 4 tax increases over the last 10-year period. So, we show this chart, basically shows that we have the lowest millage in the area. I just want to be clear, that's not to say that other people are overtaxing or anything like that. One of the reasons we show this is just to show that we haven't taxed to that level. And, me being here for a long time, we were not always the lowest. And some of those that were lower than us are now quite higher than us. So, as we go through time, we really, our goal has always been to only tax what we need in order to be fiscally responsible. So, again, in no way is this chart saying that people are overtaxing or anything like that. It's just basically showing that this is where we are, and we are significantly lower than the other districts at this point. Also want to point out on this chart, our configuration in Southern New York is a little different than others. Couldn't get data on all the districts, but we're able to get data from one of the districts that adjoins us on the south and west part of the county, and the southwest part of the county. And basically, their configuration is very different than ours. So we are 90% residential and farm property. They are only 80% residential and farm property. So that puts us in a different burden for our residential properties because we have 10% more. So really, anything we do really impacts our residential properties. And so I do think that's an important thing to point out as we kind of walk through this. So this is a new chart, in talking to Mr. Decker and him trying to learn school business. He had some questions I thought were really good and really kind of showing where we sit in the county. Again, we looked at our millage, but if you look at the second column, median household property assessment, we are the highest on there, as you'll notice. One of the reasons is we know we have higher valued properties in Southern New York. The second reason is we really don't have a downtown area that has lower income. I mean, we have some small, but not what I would call a traditional downtown, which most districts do have, that really lowers their overall assessment. So they may be on the Maryland line too, but have a median assessment lower than ours because they have those offsetting properties that maybe aren't as high in value. And then the third piece is always important to look at, market value personal income aid ratio. So the state uses these different ratios to kind of rank school districts, and this is based on the value of our market value in the district, so the actual market value of our properties, and the personal income of the people that live here. And we, for 25-26, have the lowest. So the lower you are, the wealthier you are. It's the way it works. So the closer you get to 1 means that you are less wealthy or more poor. The closer you get to 1 being 1.0, the closer you get to 0, you are more wealthy. Does that make sense? So this was kind of interesting for us because York Suburban had always been a lower aid ratio than us. This is the first year that we are now lower. We're pretty close to them, but we are at the lowest, meaning the value of our properties and the income that our residents have has put us in a wealthier position. And it does make sense. By far, we have the lowest free and reduced lunch population of any of the districts around. So I think part of this looks at, okay, we have a higher median assessed value, but we also have a higher ability to pay than a lot of the other districts have because of our personal income.
It also makes sense that the three southernmost districts in the county, which are all closest to Maryland, are the highest property values.
Right. Yeah, and I think if you would pull out some of those downtowns, we would be kind of more neck and neck with them on the assessment.
Yep. Great chart, very helpful.
Good. So now we're gonna roll into some budget options. So we have 4 listed here. So option 1, use of fund balance at 1.7, so that in 1 year, that gets us to what I consider a reasonable amount of use of fund balance. So it doesn't use the 2-year approach, it does it in 1 year. Has debt service of 0.2, so 320,000. So really helps us accelerate getting that plan in place for the building projects. It is the full tax increase of almost 4.4%, so 4.37%, but it does yield about $1.5 million in tax revenue. Option 2 is a little bit different than option 1 in that we slow down that use of fund balance to about 1.8, debt service of 160,000, tax increase of 3.47%, yielding about $1.2 million in tax revenue. Option 3, $2 million use of fund balance, 160,000 for debt service, yields about $1 million in tax revenue, is a little under 3% increase, or 2.96%. And then option 4 uses about $2.7 million in fund balance, so really more than we're recommending. Does not put anything in for debt service, does not have a tax increase, but we would need to do additional cuts even to make that work. So we would need at least 1 more professional staff member to make option 4 work. So we are recommending option 3, which was the use of fund balance of about $2 million, puts in about 1/10 of a mil for debt service and facility renovations. Does have a tax increase of 2.96%, which puts our tax rate at 20.5 mils. Results in a tax increase of $108.75 per median household, so back to that $184,000 median household again. I will comment, though, that is last year's number. We won't have this year's number till May 1st, so we're just using that one at this point. And as Trevor mentioned earlier, over the last several years, the tax bills in our district based on a median property have gone down $136, so that still would be, they would still be paying less than they did in 21, 22 if this tax increase were approved. So looking at fund balance as we do each year, we're rolling it forward. Per board policy, we need to keep $3.4 million or 5% for cash flow purposes. As we presented in December, we have potential to need to send another $210,000 to Lincoln Benefit Trust to smooth out health insurance rates next year. So that gets us down to $12.5 million, $12.6 million in fund balance. If we use $2 million for smoothing out this budget, that would leave us about $10.6 million for capital projects. Really, it's just a calculation, so depending on where we would want to go with fund balance use, the difference would go to capital projects. But that's just illustrating where our fund balance would be. Keep in mind, though, one thing to point out, while it looks like it's $10.5 million, if everything comes exactly like we say it's going to, which we know that's not going to happen, we're not that good, but it'll come somewhere close. If you use that $10.5 million for capital projects, then you would not have money to do this again next year. So we've got to keep that in mind going forward. So that's really why we want to pull down our use of fund balance and or reliance on fund balance and not have it quite so high. So real quickly, these are the other funds in the district. We just point this out each year because hiding anything. Here's all the money we have. Any It's as of June 30th, 2025, when we were last audited, but we do point out that there's an additional 8 million, or 8.9 million in capital reserve that we transferred earlier this year. So budget next steps, at the board meeting or this evening, if you'd like to discuss, we would like direction on what to bring to April for budget, because we do need to bring something back for a proposed budget to be approved in April. Remember that anything approved in April can change between April and May. It can go up, it can go down, any changes can be made. But we really want to keep on the timeline of approving something in April so that we can approve a final budget at the May board meeting. And that's where in April you don't even have to talk about tax rate, because the tax rate would not be set until the May meeting. In addition to, we'll have the homestead farmstead information by then.
Very good. So, yeah, we can definitely have some discussion, but just want to encourage members. I mean, we just took in a lot of information. We'll definitely need to provide some direction by Thursday, but if folks don't feel like they've fully digested this and want to take it home, we can do that too. So if people are ready to give their recommendation tonight, they can certainly give their recommendation or individual direction, but Thursday's probably when we need everybody to kind of be given general direction on where we're heading.
I mean, especially with the time, deferring that till Thursday probably makes sense.
Okay.
I have one question though, and I'm sure I could probably look this up on my own. But the $10.5 million you show as assigned future capital projects, what are those?
No, we do what's called an assignment to fund balance, so that
So they're
can be
not
used.
already
No,
approved.
they're not.
So that $10 million, or $10.5 million, it is designated for future projects, but not assigned to future projects.
Yes.
Got it.
When you were talking about the
Assigned
need.
to future projects.
It's
not
not,
assigned
it's
to
assigned, but it's
this
not committed,
future
it's not
project.
committed. Let's say that, it's not committed to future projects.
So option 4, when you were suggesting that, or you were telling us that one more professional staff member, I assume through attrition, when would that have to happen?
What do you mean?
Like, when would the attrition of the one more professional staff member have to happen in order to make that budget number work for option 4? Like, is it
Did
a,
you say it was one additional staff member for
Yeah.
option 4 to work?
Yeah, I think one, again, each staff member is not exactly the same amount of money, but we can make
Right.
it work with one. We would need to know if there's an additional staff member so that we can make that work.
gotcha.
And let me say it a different way. We believe we could make that work, but let me caution you too that everyone we do in the budget means that, like, I'll say it this way. So this year for 25, 26, after we approved the budget, we didn't fill 2.5 positions. And we still are in this situation. So while we're taking out 12 and 7, we will continue to scrutinize and look, and if people leave, we won't fill them. But if we take them out of the budget, that's putting us in a place next year where that didn't help balance anything.
Right.
And so this is kind of, explain it this way. I think when folks first came on the board and we started talking about surpluses, there was this, I won't say that people thought it was bad, but I felt, I'll say it this way, I felt like, oh my gosh, you're running a surplus, that's not good. But we saw it as a good thing because while we would budget for something, we wouldn't necessarily spend it unless we needed to. And so that's the way we look at it, and I'll include Bob and Len in there, because we're always looking at if we can, after the budget's passed, continue to not fill or cut or not need things, we're starting the next budget year in a better position. And so that's the only caution I'll say is everything we take out of here just to make it work, we're starting in a worse position when we start this process again next year. And we don't have, as you go back to that professional chart, we don't have the latitude to cut that many more positions. I mean, we can, but I don't know that we can get another 20. And so, again, my caution is, yes, we could probably make that work, but we're using, to make 4 work, we're using $2.7 million in fund balance and additional staff. And if we actually use that 2.7, we're starting off way behind where we want to for the next. And that's my responsibility to make sure you understand that.
Yeah. So when you say fully staffed, is that only in relationship to what we've budgeted for? Like, is that reality present based on budgeted, and when we say fully staffed?
So, yeah, let me explain that. So it's not even saying necessarily what we budgeted for. It's saying fully staffed in that any position we believe we need to fill, we're able to fill it.
Gotcha.
Which is right after the pandemic, we may have needed 4 or 5 professional staff, and we're actively recruiting for them, but we just couldn't get them.
That makes sense.
And when I say fully staffed, it's anyone we think
We need.
that we want to, that we're actively trying to fill.
Thank you.
We're able to do that now.
So then the only positive impact could potentially be to the fund balance would be the sale of the property, because those proceeds would essentially land here because they have to go towards building projects.
Yes, that would be positive to fund balance, but it wouldn't help the structural deficit.
Correct. But it could essentially erase at least a year of structural deficit.
But not reoccurring.
Well, I'll disagree a little bit in terminology. It will help move us there, but it won't erase the structural deficit, because the further away our expenses get from our revenue, the more that deficit grows. And it's there, whether kind of like if you're paying, if you lose your job and you have savings and you're paying your mortgage with it, eventually when your mortgage is gone, you still need to, or let me give a different example. You lose your job where you're making X and now you're making less than X, and you're using your savings to balance it. Once your savings is gone, you still have that hole.
Yeah.
that
I
you've gotta
totally
fill.
understand that. I'm talking about it in a single year perspective.
Yep.
It gives you a year of runway.
Thank you.
What's that?
It gives you a year of runway. Doesn't slow the plane down.
Yeah, yeah.
2 quick things, not quick, but I'll try to make them quick. I don't believe you're going to cut to change the structural deficit. You're not going to cut your way out of it. We're looking at that, we're doing it. The other thing we're doing in doing what we're doing with reducing expenditures, we're increasing our risk for all the things that potentially happen that come in over budget. We're now creating a worse situation for the next budget, which I think is what Sue had indicated. And we're seeing that happen in other districts right now, where they're spending more than what they had budgeted. And it's because you can only get it so low before there's no buffer for any mistake. And none of us want to put us in that situation. That's the first piece. The second piece is, I know I'll hear in the private sector, well, Amazon dropped, how many jobs? Like 10,000, whatever and that's like 5% of their workforce. We're there. We're doing the same thing with 200 employees, 220 employees. So that number is just as great to us as it is to an Amazon nationally. We can only do it in a business that is depending upon face-to-face operations and developing our kids. We can only do that so far. I can't give you a number, but I know we're not gonna get another 2.7 million that way. So I'd just leave you with that thought. Not a good one, but we need to be transparent.
Yeah, it's a challenging budget year, but I just want to say excellent presentation. I sat through a lot of professional presentations, and you both are top shelf, so thank you for putting this together.
And thank you for turning over every rock and really coming to the table with more than one option. And we do, as a board, have a fiduciary responsibility also to fund the program. I think everyone that lives in this district can respect and understand that. And if we didn't care, we wouldn't be wrestling with it. So, you know, I am in agreement with option 3. I think that's a compromise. I think in the situation we're in, we could be raising taxes at the index for 2 years in a row. And the district is working with us to do everything they can with our enrollment struggles to bring us to a place where we don't have to go that high to be able to fund. And we all know that prices are going up for everything, and that doesn't change for our district. And everything that Mr. Carrington and Mrs. Green have been doing to try and offset that for the last few years that we haven't raised. And no one wants to sit here and raise taxes. None of us do, because we don't want that impact on the people that put us here. But we also have a fiduciary responsibility to fund the program. We cannot leave holes, or else the kids that we are sitting here for are going to be affected. So we cannot
I
continue
hear
to
you,
nickel
but
and
I
dime
do think it's
them.
interesting that Ms. Muser referenced it in her public comment, and I know that all of us know where she stands, and yet she looks at it and says, you know, my 94-year-old dad, you know, this is, you know, a substantial burden to him. So it is a hard balance.
It is.
Yeah, I think I think we all understand what needs to be done and where we need to go. The struggle is the tools that we have to do it. And I sure wish that we had more of a variety of tools. We don't. I mean, we have the system that we have the taxing mechanism that we have, and so we have to make a decision in light of the tools that we have, right? But I'll just lament, again, I sure wish we had different tools available to us. I would encourage everybody to go through I know you all will, go through the deck again. I've been through it a couple times already, and a lot of helpful information, so. And we'll talk more about this on Thursday.
And I know you have a small PowerPoint. It is attached to board docs, so if you want to see the slides.
Thank you.
I do see that we have a 3.02 budget development timeline. Was that the last slide that we
Yes.
already went through? Okay, so 3.02 is complete. 3.03 is other items of business. I don't think we have any tonight. Am I correct in that? Okay. So 4 would be new business. I have none. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay. Meeting is adjourned.